Hello everyone and welcome to this Greenstone webinar on the GRI Standards. I'm Jake Ewell and I am the Client Services Manager here at Greenstone. I'll be taking you through the content of this webinar today. And we'll be looking at the progress made a year on from the launch of the GRI Standards. And we'll also have a bit of a look at reporting trends in general towards the end. So before we get into some of the content, we will be making the slides available after the webinar. And just to note that as we only have 30 minutes today and quite a lot of content to get through, we will not likely have time for questions and answers during the presentation. But please do still use the questions function provided, which should be on the right-hand side of your screen. And we will follow up with all questions asked after the webinar with you directly. So yeah, please do answer questions throughout the webinar. Okay, so today we will start by giving a bit of an introduction to Greenstone. Some of you may already be familiar with us, but for those of you who are not, let's provide a bit of context on who we are, the work we do, etc. Next, we can have a bit of background on GRI and the standards themselves, the history of the organisation, the evolution of the reporting guidelines over the years, and everything else. Then we can have a look back at what has happened in the first year since the GRI standards were launched, have a look at some of the progress that has been made, a few stats, and some of the upcoming changes as well. Then a look at some reporting trends, firstly specifically relating to GRI, but also more widely at reporting in general as well. Then we'll have a few best practice examples which we can have a look at, and that's specifically relating to GRI standards reports. And finally, a look forward at the future of reporting, so what we can expect from GRI specifically, but also in terms of general non-financial or sustainability reporting. Okay, so we'll start by giving a bit of an introduction to Greenstone. As I said, some of you may already know about us, but for those of you who don't, we are a non-financial reporting and responsible sourcing solutions company. We provide software that covers data collection, management and reporting around environmental, CSR frameworks, health and safety and supply chain areas. So all of our solutions are cloud-based, SaaS-hosted platforms and are used globally by organisations in multiple sectors. So that includes professional services, financial services, manufacturing, government departments, and many other private and public sector areas. So the software is flexible and is being used on many types of organisations. So our CSR framework module is the one kind of most relevant for today, and that one contains both the G4 and GRI standards content, and we were actually one of the first software tools to complete the GRI standards certification process earlier this year. And this program, which is the Certified Software Tools Program, basically guarantees that a software solution is using the GRI content accurately. And the final point on us is our key differentiator, which is our data that talks to you brand promise. And by that we mean we don't just provide you with software, but we'll also work with you to ensure that you get everything out of the system that you need to fulfill your reporting needs as efficiently as possible. And we do this at our own cost, and to achieve this, all clients get uncapped support from a named account manager from our team of consultants. And all these consultants have environmental and sustainability backgrounds. So you can use this support for general system requests such as login details and passwords, but also for asking for more technical advice on things relating to reporting and data challenges. Great, so that was a bit about us, and now on to the GRI standards. And to start with a bit of background on GRI itself, but also the standards. So I'm sure some of you already know some of this, but it's useful just to go through some of this background and the history of the GRI as it kind of frames some of the discussions we'll be looking at later on. So firstly, the GRI was established back in 1997 in the US, but relocated to Amsterdam in 2002. And the first set of guidelines were launched in year 2000. And since then, there have been 6 updates or iterations that have been released since. So starting with GRI 1, G1 in 2000, followed by G2 in 2002, G3 in 2006, 3.1 in 2010, through to G4 in 2012, and finally the standards, which came late last year. So what this shows is that there's been regular updates over the years, and these have been made for various reasons, but primarily just to keep the guidelines up to date and reflective of changes to the sustainability and reporting landscape. So for example, one of the key changes in G4 when that came out was a significant increased focus on materiality. So this came about from the realization that not all topic areas are relevant for all organizations, and certainly some topic areas will be more relevant than others. And having this materiality assessment essentially means that organizations can focus on the areas that are the most relevant to the various stakeholder groups that are there. And this basically means that sustainability reports are far more focused and, more importantly, provide the information that the readers actually want to see. Great, so a bit more background here. So the GRI has long been and will continue to be one of the most widely used reporting frameworks globally. And on the GRI online database currently, there are 11,000 plus organizations and more than 40,000 GRI reports that are available for you to search through and view. And this is a very useful tool, so if you haven't looked at it already and are looking to report against GRI soon, I would definitely recommend spending some time to look through this database to have a look at some examples of reports currently out there. So because of this focus on materiality, which I mentioned before, the GRI is very flexible and can be used by all types of organizations from many sectors. And although there are a number of supplementary sector-specific disclosures which are recommended to be used, it is not a key requirement, and instead companies should mainly focus on the areas that are most material to them. So another key point is that the guidelines are very prescriptive, so all disclosures are very clear in what they require companies to report on and what they need to do. So this is quite different to some of the other frameworks out there, such as the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, or the UN Global Compact, as these contain much more high-level statements, and the actual reporting process behind those statements is less well defined. So the fact that GRI is very clear and makes it very prescriptive on what is needed does make it a bit easier to work out what needs to be reported. So the latest version of GRI guidelines, which is the GRI Standards, which we're looking at today, they were released late last year by the Global Sustainability Standards Board, or GSSB, which is basically just a sub-entity of the GRI. And this happened across 28 launch events starting in October 2016, and that happened in 25 different countries. And I briefly mentioned this, but the main change is the migration from one large document, which was G4, so one overall guideline document, into a more modular set of standards, which the GRI are referring to as a more flexible and future-proof set of guidelines. So within this, there are 3 universal standards, which is GRI Foundation, GRI 102, which is where the more general disclosures are, and GRI 103, which covers the management approach that organizations can take in relation to each material area. So GRI Foundation is a key one to have a look at if you are looking to report against GRI for the first time. So if that is something that the position you are currently in, then I would recommend having a look through GRI Foundation, as that kind of summarizes and is a starting point of how the rest of the standards can be used. And as well as the 3 universal standards, there are also 33 topic-specific standards, which are grouped into economic, environmental, and social areas. And these are where the actual bulk of the performance information that will be reported on is included and is referenced, and guidelines are made on them. Okay, so what specifically changed in GRI Standards in comparison to G4? Well, the primary change is what I've already mentioned, is the restructuring and the new format, from the one overall document of G4. So this now modular approach in the GRI Standards has been introduced to allow the GRI to update individual areas without having to relaunch the entire framework. So previously, if a particular area needed to be slightly revised, GRI could not do that very easily without relaunching the entire framework, which is quite a big thing to do. But now, if one of the 33 individual topic-specific standards need to be updated, they can be without any changes happening to the other areas. And we'll have a look in a minute at that in a bit more detail. So another change is around some of the terminology used. So indicators are now disclosures and aspects are now topics. And there's also a clarification of what is meant when worker or employee is mentioned, which was a bit of a confusion area in the G4 guidelines, so it's good to see that clarified. So another clarification was around the definition of impacts when it came to the materiality assessment, and in particular the materiality matrix, or that graph that is produced at the end of the materiality process. And again, this was an area that was quite confused in the G4 version and saw lots of different companies taking different approaches. So because of that, the GRI clarified that impacts should refer to effects outside of the organisation. So looking at the broader environmental, social and economic impacts rather than specifically thinking about the impacts on your own company. So this is not a massive change, it's more just a clarification of what should be done. We also had a clarification on sector disclosures, which the GRI confirmed as a recommended thing to use rather than a key requirement. And it also clarified that organisations must notify them when the GRI standards have been used and referenced. And finally, we have a clarification around reporting boundaries. So the GRI clarified that the boundary used should be reported for each material topic used. So not just once overall, but for every topic used, the boundary should be included and clarified. So those were the main kind of clarifications and changes. So as you can see, there's more clarifications and changes actually. There should not require any large-scale changes from the G4 approach. So if you are already reporting on G4 and are looking to report against GRI standards, you should not have to change too much in the reporting process. Great, so that was a look back at a bit of background on GRI and the GRI standards, and now we're going to have a look about what has happened over the last year or so since the GRI standards were launched. So here are a few stats which the GRI released at the 1 year point. So I already mentioned the top one, about 28 launch events in 25 countries. We also have one around about the people who got introduction to GRI standards, which was 3,415. Tens of thousands of copies have been accessed to so far, and more than 150 organisations have joined the Standards Pioneer Program. So that program is for organisations already reporting on non-financial issues, a bit more mature in the journey, and are looking to improve their process. So the program includes a number of webinars and guidance documents and resources to help companies who are already reporting just get to that next stage in their journey. So what this shows is just the level of interest, and there has been a lot of uptake of GRI standards, which will continue to increase and be used going forward. So I mentioned before about how GRI are now able to update and review individual parts of the guidelines. So we'll have a look here at the ones that are currently under review. At the moment, it is GRI 303 water and GRI 403 occupational health and safety. So the way this will work is that there's currently a date associated with each standard. So currently everything is associated with 2016, as that's when they were launched in October last year. But when the water and health and safety updates are issued, these particular standards will become GRI 303, water 2018, and GRI 403 2018. So by the time they're actually released next year, it'll be 2018, so instead of having the 2016 tag next to them, they'll become the 2018 version. So when organisations are using these, they'll always be able to see that they're using the latest version. And here we have a bit more detail on the review and update process around water and HNS, which I won't spend too much time on, but just gives a bit of insight on how the changes are made, and a similar approach will be taken to the next ones which we'll look at. So the review process has been taking place over 2017, and the aim of this is to keep the content up to date with best practice and with any new developments in water or health and safety management or reporting. So there was a 60-day public comment period on the proposed changes, which ended recently in October. So if you are interested in providing input on any of the upcoming standards, which will be reviewed, then do look out for details of how to do this and how to take part in the public comment periods on the GRI website. And there's also more details on this online on the GRI website, including some webinar recordings where they go through the proposed changes. So if you are particularly interested in water and health and safety changes, then I'd recommend having a look at these. And what we have here is a full breakdown of the GSSB's Work Program, which details all of the changes and reviews which are planned in the next year or so. So after water and health and safety, the GRI will be looking at introducing some new disclosures around tax and payments to governments. And this work will commence in Q1 next year. There will also be a focus on the human rights related standards, and this could cover any of the current ones, including 408, child labour, 409, forced and compulsory labour, or even 412, human rights assessments. And this is also planned for Q1 next year. And after this, a few economic standards will be looked at, which will commence in Q2 2018. And it's also just worth noting that here it shows that the water and health and safety standards, which are currently being reviewed, are due to be released in Q2 2018. So if you are planning on reporting against the GRI standards soon after that point, it would be worth reviewing the draft changes sooner rather than later, just to ensure that your data collection and reporting efforts are aligned. Great, so next we can have a look at some of the reporting trends, which we have seen by working with our clients here at Greenstone. And firstly, I look specifically at some of the trends in relation to GRI. So as I mentioned earlier, GRI continues to be one of the most widely used non-financial reporting frameworks globally. And there are a couple of interesting stats here which have come from a recent report which KPMG produced. And this shows that from the survey they carried out, 75% of the largest 250 companies globally are using GRI, whether that's G4 or the GRI standards. And as well as that, 63% of all companies globally in this survey are using them. So these are obviously very, very high numbers. It shows that the GRI is a very well and highly used framework. And if you have a look at the GRI Sustainability Disclosure Database, which is the online platform which you can search through all the reports registered on there, there are currently 300 reports currently registered on that database which have used the GRI standards. So this is a great resource for reports which you could utilize to view other reporting techniques and approaches, which is a very useful thing to do if you're starting out the reporting journey. But also, if you're migrating from G4, it'd be worth having a look at some of the GRI standards reports already produced, to have a look at some of the processes people have taken. So another key trend is a significant increase in the number of companies and organizations who have linked the GRI disclosures to the SDGs or the Sustainable Development Goals. So the GRI is currently working with the UN Global Compact on a collaborative initiative called Business Reporting on the SDGs. And that aims to help companies report against the SDGs and help contribute to the very important goals and targets that have been set. And this is a trend that we've seen here at Greenstone, and we've had a number of clients recently link the SDGs to the current reporting efforts. So this is certainly something that we'll see, we expect to see increasing more and more. And this graphic at the bottom here shows the various areas that the GRI and UNGC collaboration is focusing on. I won't go through this in detail now, but do have a look through if it's of interest at a later date when we circulate the slides. So that was a bit about GRI specifically and the trends in relation to that. And now we can have a look at some of the trends in reporting generally. And the main one which we're going to focus on is the trend of increased frameworks and increased reporting. So I'm sure many of you have been experiencing this, and it may be causing many headaches, but today there are just a lot more reporting frameworks, tools, outlets, requirements, however you want to frame them. There are many more of them today than ever. So organizations can no longer just look at GRI reporting, but are now expected from the stakeholders to look at a number of other frameworks as well. And on the screen here, we have a selection of examples, including GRI, CDP, SDGs, SASB, DJSI, GRSB, and a number of other different acronyms. So what can organizations do to help alleviate some of this continually increasing reporting burden and the pressure from stakeholders? Well, firstly, as I said before, GRI is no longer and can no longer be looked at as just a standalone reporting tool, but will often need to be one part of a wider set of frameworks. So organizations need to link GRI with all other relevant frameworks and internal reporting requirements, just to ensure that there is a streamlined process, just to minimize some of the duplications when it comes to data collection. And doing this linkage exercise just minimizes the risk of reporting error. For example, if you're reporting the same information or similar information to multiple frameworks such as GRI, but also to other reporting assessments such as CDP, then having one data collection metric that feeds into both of these reporting requirements just reduces that risk of reporting different figures. And this is a task that we have been doing significantly more with clients recently here at Greenstone, in that we aim to take all the reporting requirements from across an organization, all the frameworks, all the requirements, and map these together. This then allows us to create one central directory of metrics that can feed into multiple reporting requirements. So just one example, say one metric is Scope 1 carbon emissions from the whole organization. Well, that metric feeds into the annual GRI reports, but also the CDP submission. It could go into the GSSI questionnaire, etc., etc. So by having one data collection metric that is effectively tagged by each of these reporting frameworks, the data should only be collected once and can then be used for multiple reporting processes. And this image here just demonstrates that process. So we have a selection of frameworks with data at the heart. So there's just one central database, and that can be used multiple times for the various reporting requirements. And this slide I won't spend too long on, but this is just a screenshot from our CSR frameworks module, which has the GRI standards built in. And this shows how we manage that metric mapping process in the system. So the GRI standards have been mapped to UN Global Compact, OECD guidelines for multinational enterprises, SDGs, etc., etc. So when the relevant areas of the GRI standards have been selected in the system, so when you've done materiality and selected your material topic areas, the relevant disclosures will pull through into a questionnaire, which can then be distributed across the organization. And for each metric, there is effectively a mapping tag which shows every relevant framework that that one metric relates to. Great. So next we can have a look at a few best practice examples of how different people are reporting against GRI standards. So I'm not going to spend too long on this, as you can go through these in more detail in your own time, but I thought it would just be useful to highlight a few different examples of how companies are taking different approaches to GRI reporting, and in particular focus on how they have linked GRI to the SDGs. So the first one is H&M, which have used the GRI standards and done an in accordance core report, and this one is linked to the SDGs, UN Global Compact, and it's also been externally assured. So if that seems familiar, something you're looking to do, then you can have a look at that one. The next one is General Motors Company, which has done also an in accordance core report, which has also been linked to the SDGs and UN Global Compact. But a slight difference in this one is that General Motors have shown how their sustainability initiatives go across all 17 goals of the SDGs. So they try to look at every one of the areas of the SDGs, whereas H&M has done a more focused look at a few particular SDGs which are more material to them. So that just shows a different approach that companies can take whether to focus efforts on a few material areas or to try and look at the breadth of the issues in the SDGs and try and report on all of them. And the final one is ING Group, which did an in accordance but a comprehensive version of the report, also linked to SDGs, UNGC and OECD. And the difference here is that this one is an integrated report, so integrating the GRI and sustainability disclosures with the financial information as well. So if that's something that you're interested in doing or looking to do, then that would be a good one to have a look at. So all of these, just to clarify, are available on the GRI database, so you can find them and search for them and download and view the actual report there. So the final part of this webinar is to look forward at the future of reporting. And firstly, let's specifically look at GRI. So I've already talked about the continuous review and update of the GRI standards, but just to clarify a few of the upcoming changes that are happening, obviously water and health and safety, which we talked about, but then disclosures on tax and payments to governments, human rights related standards will be reviewed after that, and then finally some of the economic standards will be looked at as well. And another focus area of GRI is around the corporate leadership groups. So I've talked about the corporate action group, which is the one with UNGC and GRI on the Sustainable Development Goals. So that is aiming to help companies report and align with the SDGs, introducing new metrics, and yeah, helping companies contribute towards the goals and targets in there. And the other key one is the integrated reporting group, which is a collaboration of GRI and IIRC, which is the Integrated Reporting Council. And again, that one, similar to the SDGs, is trying to help companies with the process of using GRI in an integrated version of their annual report. So whereas previously GRI, or historically GRI, be very much a standalone sustainability reporting tool, actually looking at now how companies can integrate that with their financial information as well. And that was a bit about GRI, but looking forward, something that we at Greenstone have seen quite a lot is this change shown here, which is a change from a more cyclical process of collecting data to report to a more continuous data collection reporting. So historically, organizations would go through a process once a year of collecting lots of data at the end in a very time-pressured way, and then having to quickly turn that around into a report. And they go through that cyclical process every year of collecting, reporting, collecting, reporting. But actually, with all the many different types of reports that need to be produced and the many different frameworks out there today, it's much better to move towards this continuous reporting process where you collect data throughout the year, and then you have this central database system which can then be pulled on at different times to extract the data from many different reports. So I appreciate that's quite a difficult thing to achieve, but it is very useful and important to move towards that where possible. Great, so I won't go through this slide, but just a few resources which you can have a look at in your own time, which are useful and provide some information on GRI, but also the SDGs and some of the work programs going on. Great, so that kind of summarizes the main content of the webinar today. The last thing I wanted to highlight is that here at Greenstone, we have done a number of readiness assessment consultancy projects with some of our software clients recently. And as part of this, we look at organizations' current reporting processes, their aims and targets, and try to help them achieve these goals by providing some achievable recommendations for how they can do that. So we would like to make this service available to all of the registered attendees of this webinar. So if this does sound of interest or you'd like to know a bit more about this, then please do get in touch using the contact details shown here, and we can look to set that up. Okay, so that concludes the content for today's webinar. We cover some background on GRI, look at the progress over the past year, some reporting trends, best practice examples, and finally a look at some of the future of reporting. So obviously this was quite a quick and short webinar. So if you do have any questions or want to ask about more information, then please do get in touch. And if you have asked any questions, then we will get back to you directly afterwards. Great, I hope you all found it useful, and thanks for your time and have a great day.